Your hosts are the Great Order and No White Guilt, and this is the one and only After Party. The crown winner of last week is a tie between JK160 and Quebec, both financially gifting $10. Congratulations, and thank both of you gentlemen so very much. In second place, we have the one and only Irish Ice, financially gifting $5. God bless you, brother. Thank you. Congratulations. Financially gift on Entropy, which will be up in a moment, where you can also watch the stream, ask and vote on questions, or you may financially gift over on Cash App. The URLs for both are in the description below. Jared and I evenly share the financial gifts. We evenly share the financial gifts with our guests here on the After Party. Today, here on tap, one of our heroes who, in the future, like our other heroes in White Wellbeing, will be featured in the Legends of Our People, Roy Danton, and he will be discussing the recent-ish slander of the AFA. Roy, please introduce yourself to our esteemed community. Tell them where they can find you, and Mr. George will take us into this wonderful conversation.
Well, hello, and thank you so very much for having me. Yeah, my name is Roy Danton. You can find me on pretty much on Gab and on Twitter. I'm known as the Roy Danton on all social media platforms. I'm also in Telegram. I'm quite active in the White Wellbeing chat. And I'm just getting started on YouTube to upload some stuff on my YouTube style to get into producing some videos.
Boo. Okay. Here I am. Hello. So yeah, Jason, as Jason mentioned, we're going to be speaking primarily about this Guardian piece, Guardian out of the UK, but I guess they're doing more stories in the States now. They have, I guess, some kind of correspondence in the US. So they chose to do this little feature on the AFA. Now, of course, we spoke, Jason, I think it was in May, if memory serves, that Matt Flavel, I always said Flavel, but I think it's Flavel actually. But Roy, let me know if you know. But the head of the AFA, he was on, lovely guy. His daughter was on for a moment, his little baby daughter, a beautiful little girl. And he's got a beautiful young family. So he told us about his story, how he came to that, what that organization is about. Of course, to be here with us on tap, everything had to be, we knew that his head was in the right place and the organization's aims are in the right place. And it's just for the health and well-being of their community, their heritage, the beliefs that they have, going back to Europe, particularly Northern European roots and the legends and the spirituality of that area. And God forbid that people want to be able to gather together and celebrate that together, have a community around that. So Roy, you're going to tell us about this Guardian piece that was done when they focused on the AFA in Minnesota. So I guess what we could do, I mean, Jason and I, and we'll be taking questions throughout, we'll pepper questions in as you're speaking, but I guess if you could just begin to take us through, because I know you're working on responses to this as well, but how the Guardian framed it, how they set it up, and then as we go through, I guess you can kind of give us step by step what the Guardian said, and then what you know to be true. Like, please let us know where the Guardian failed to deliver on the truth, and perhaps skewered things to a certain degree. I don't know. That happens in the media sometimes. But take us through what they said, and then as you do each point, as you know, as someone who's a participant, as a member of this organization, you can set the record straight and let us know how things might have been misrepresented in that piece.
Yeah, so first of all, I would like to start just saying that, like, I'm not speaking in any official way or something like that. It's like just like I'm just a normal person and I'm just giving like my personal opinion on how I believe things should be done. So I've actually just returned from a wonderful camping trip. I've been out in nature for 2 weeks. It was amazing, and actually met bunch of the AFA folks because we had one of our national events. It was so nice being around with ordinary, normal people and just being out in nature in a beautiful setting somewhere in nature. And then I was traveling a little bit and I had so much fun. And actually, so this being my first time on Tab, but much, Jared, when I first met you online, I always thought that, hey, my first appearance on Tab is likely going to be something like negative. It's probably, oh, I got dogs, I got fired from my job, and then I'm gonna talk on Tab about, because I never saw myself as like a content creator or somebody who might make a video or even speak. I was actually quite scared of speaking in public. I thought, oh, I'm not very good at speaking. I have this German accent that I just recently learned to be proud of and not something that I should feel ashamed for. And then oftentimes, because I was using just the computer microphone, I had those problems when I was having video conferences that people had problems understanding me. So I was quite nervous and scared. But then when I was out in nature, I actually bought this dash cam, mounted it to the RV, and took some video, and then also started talking a bit. And I had some episodes where I sat at a campfire and just recorded something and uploaded it to YouTube and shared it to some people. But yeah, and then I came home, and then somebody sent me a link to this very, very disgusting piece of The Guardian. So I have watched it a couple of times, and then I have started to make a reaction type video. And my idea is to primarily this to be something for, let's say, somebody in the AFA has friends, family, co-workers who might find this piece from The Guardian and gets worried about what is being told in that piece. And they're using some very nasty techniques. And the trailer is actually a lot worse than the actual video itself. And as things are today, most people just watch like a short trailer that's 2 minutes. They don't watch a 15-minute video. So those anti-whites, they really made sure to put as much negativity, as much worrying stuff into that trailer.
In the trailer, yeah, it's a scare tactics. They probably have dun today.
Yeah,
we interview these dun scary, hateful people.
And if I remember correctly, if you go to this article that they published on their website, the first link actually gets you to the trailer, which is on YouTube. And in the video description is a link to the full video. So first you only see a 2-minute or something long summary. So one thing that they are doing is, and I've seen this in the media quite often, is that they show you a short clip talking about something, and then there's a cut and a change of scenery, and they show you something completely different. But for somebody who is just sitting in front of a television screen and just casually watching that, if you see one clip, somebody talking about something, and then the scene changes to something else, we will naturally think those two are together, related to each other. The human mind might think subconsciously, okay, I see this and I see that must be somewhat connected. So this trailer starts with a short introduction saying, hey, the AFA wants to purchase this church. They show these wonderful pictures of the church, and then there is a cut and they show some people marching in the street. I'm not sure where this is taken from. They later mention a certain town in Virginia, which is, let's just say, because the ear is against the wall, it's near that area where 64 meets 81, in that area in Virginia. So they show people marching, and it's just a couple of seconds, and then they change again. They show some ancient Norse symbols, and then they use some words that Jason has actually pointed out in the show several times that we should not use those words at all, because they're used by ant nets and they also are associated with domestic terrorism. Of course, the anti-whites in The Guardian specifically use those words, and they very much try to link our religion, our church, with those seemingly violent people in the streets marching. And then you see this black lady who's doing some interviews. You see some short clips from people from the AFA. Of course, they only pick like short pieces from that. In the trailer, the section they focus on is pretty much saying, okay, we exclude other people. So they didn't bring the part, like later on in the actual video, you see like a longer section from the video for the interview that they did with somebody in the AFA. In the video, they only picked the short section that says, okay, you need to be of native European descent. And so in my video, I pointed out the MP is pretty much that heritage is unimportant. And the MC would be, you wouldn't say that to a non-white person, and that means you are anti-white. And they use a lot of these tactics. And then they interview some guy who calls himself an anti, and then the anti-white slur that starts with an R. So the anti-white heathen. He seems to have some kind of a group, and they show short clips from like a town council meeting, and same tactics again. So it's about purchasing this church, and then there is a section from a town council meeting. You would think, oh, aren't these connected to each other? And so I just did the audio recording for this section yesterday, and what I said was pretty much, hey, so watch this first thing where they talk about the church, show the building, and say the AFA wants to purchase this, and then they show a town council meeting. What would you think the town council was talking about? Well, the reality is the church actually did not belong to the city. It was owned by a private individual who had used it as a private residence to live in, but he hadn't done any maintenance. The building was in a terrible stage. Eventually, he just wanted to get rid of it, but nobody wanted to buy it. Everybody was scared that they might have to put so much money in to restore it, or even just to tear it down. So the AFA purchased that building because we have enough volunteers who are willing to put their entire summer into restoring this building to its previous form. But because this individual had previously lived there, the zoning rules had been changed from religious use to a private residence, and all the AFA wanted to have those changed back so that it could be used as a church again.
So Roy, that, just to clarify, that's what the town council meeting was about, rezoning from residential back to religious?
Yeah, just changing from the zoning from residential back to religious, as it had been in the past.
Okay. And before we go on to, I just have a quick question to interject. If either of you know about this, or if the chat knows about this, I know there must be a lot of gray area, but when it comes to, Roy, what you said about the trailer and these cuts between people speaking about the AFA or AFA members and then totally unrelated incidents and totally unrelated groups that, you know, clearly represent something in the public eye, is there a degree, is there a line by which this can get into slander and libel? I mean, if some independent media company wanted to make a video where they did these quick cuts and they kept showing a politician and then child abuse, and the same politician and child abuse, same politician, child abuse. Now, technically, they're not saying that that politician has engaged in those heinous acts. But if you're doing this video or this commercial or whatever the kind of media is, and you keep cutting between that figure and horrible images of children being abused, like, does anyone know about this? Like, to what degree is the media able to get away with the kind of incongruous cuts that you're talking about between one image and another? I'm just throwing that question out there. I don't know if either of you know that, or if anyone in the chat knows that, but it just popped into my head as I was listening to you talk about the trailer.
That's a really great question. It would certainly seem that it's misrepresentation. Now, if a politician would probably be too popular, considered too popular by the courts to file a defamation suit against the media group that's doing it. But if it were some of white sympathetic people that did it, of say an anti-white politician, I'm sure the courts would ignore the law and precedent, and they would go ahead and permit the politician to file suit. But the other way around, maybe not. But somebody more like mid-level, who is maybe like a state rep, for example, not nationally known, for example. If you did the same thing with that person, then that, as I understand it, could be defamation, and thus, something that could be compensable. But certainly the psychological, and Roy, jump in anytime, and anybody in the chat as well. Certainly there is psychological warfare at use in their activities when they take a group of people, as they did with the AFA, and then they interpose visuals with a bunch of other groups with the intent of conflating and saying this is essentially the exact same thing. Then they certainly have misrepresented the AFA in that case, and should say something about those who they conflate with in order to misrepresent and demonize the AFA. But Roy, please pick up and
that's actually like an interesting topic, and good that you pointed it out. And you pretty much see this theme throughout the video once it processes. So the video itself, it starts with this town council meeting, and then they interview so the vote went 3-1 in favor, and they interview one of the people who had voted in favor. And so it started with him like giving some kind of answer or excuse, but you don't see the actual question being asked, just his answer to it. But he was basically saying, they didn't do anything wrong. They had every legal right to do that. They are protected as a church under the First Amendment and all that. And then this wonderful non-white lady asks him a question, which is full of MPs. And then you see that he's feeling much more uncomfortable, and he gets even more on the defensive, but he still doesn't recognize this of being anti-white. So he still tries to answer it inside the anti-white narrative.
And again, when you're saying you're talking about the representative of another heathen organization?
No, it was a member of this city council meeting.
Or I'm sorry, the city council. Okay.
Yeah, so there are 4 representatives on this council. 3 voted in favor, 1 against, and they interview one of the people who voted in favor. So he basically said, like, no, he's not doing anything wrong. Then this non-white, anti-white did a very interesting tactic. So she completely agreed to everything that guy had said and admitted, yes, the AFA has done nothing wrong, it's absolutely fine, it's absolutely legal, they're not violent, but then she immediately throws this white guilt at him. So basically, she completely devaluates all his arguments that he was making, because he was saying they're peaceful, they're not breaking the law. So her response could essentially be summarized to, no, we're not punishing them because they broke some law, we're victimizing them because they are heretical to Antiwhiteism. So that's what we should really get out of that. And then there's this little cut in the interview, and they changed location, and the guy has really calmed down a little bit. But I got the impression that she was actually making fun of him, because she was jokingly using the anti-white slur, quote unquote, white supremacist. And he mentioned that apparently the anti-whites had to find somebody from California to call and harass him on the phone. So it looks like they couldn't even find somebody from the area. Somebody from California called him, and then she said something, oh, you're more worried about somebody from California calling you than this anti-white slur being used against you. So that was this video. And then they interviewed a nice-looking white lady who was unfortunately very viciously anti-white. And even in her interview, they picked one of these sections from that for the trailer, where she said the most horrible thing about white people, because she used that ugly word, whiteness. that has been created by a certain individual. I know the Years Against Divorce. So let's just say a certain person has invented that. And so I pointed out in the video that no, you should never use that word because it doesn't mean what you might think, but it means white people are evil. So they showed that short clip. But then when you watch the actual video, you see that the anti-white reporters from The Guardian actually went to great length finding a young lady who had been so infected with meme pathogens and so full of white guilt that she did one of the most severe forms of white flight, and that is to take a non-white mate. So they went to find somebody who was married to a non-white person, and they have a wonderful child. And I wish them all the best, but they picked this couple to interview, not any of the other people who.
And why this isn't a woman who was formerly involved in AFA, correct? So why was she interviewed? Was she just a local resident and they were trying to get local reactions?
I'm not sure she was in any way affiliated with the AFA, because I think they even said she's a Christian or something like that. I believe they were just looking for somebody from that town who was the most anti-white. And they show her house from the outside. She also has those signs in the yard that you saw everywhere a couple of months ago. These ugly signs in this ugly color. And then they interview her, and the message she basically says that she feels unsafe for her family, for her children, because white people are in town, white people who are heretical to Antiwhiteism. And that's like really the tone that the reporters from this anti-white publication wanted to get across, that, oh, these people are a threat to the town. In the previous interview, this black lady had already asked, hey, but how about the non-white people who might feel uncomfortable in this town? I don't understand why they would feel uncomfortable just because there's a church. It only makes sense inside the anti-white narrative if you look at it from that perspective. And then after this interview, they show like more pictures from people marching at an event, and then they actually mentioned where that event happened. It was that town in Virginia where the Interstate 81 meets the 64. And they also mentioned another organization from the past, that the Years Against the Wall. It's some, I think, very nasty, evil people who had existed a long time ago. And they try to somehow link the AFA with those people, because there were some people at this rally and some people who were violent. They were shown some Norse and ancient symbols. So pretty much the idea here is this guilt by association. The idea that, okay, those people are dangerous because others are using those symbols.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think we all know how it would be framed if it came up, because hypocrisy doesn't really mean anything. A lot of people point out hypocrisy all the time, but they don't realize, as we say here all the time, that there's no cognitive dissonance when someone's in the anti-white narrative, because they'll use anything to get to an anti-white conclusion, and they'll happily contradict themselves. But just so our listeners understand the whole scope of this, did anyone at any point in this video try to give an analogous situation of non-white groups? Because there's certainly plenty of groups, magazines, TV networks, I could go on and on, political organizations that expressly are for, by, and about these other groups. Did anyone at any point mention the fact that these groups of all varieties are everywhere in American culture, and that apparently that's not an issue?
No, you only briefly saw this yard sign with the 3 words on it. I'm not sure whether I should mention them. But I think we all know what those 3 words are. So that's the only part where they really talked about non-white people. But later on, they mention another group once we get a bit later in that video. But the really disturbing part was that they were interviewing this young lady, and the black lady who was doing the interview, she seems quite nice and cool. And it looked like something, okay, here's a young family. They are worried about, like, is their daughter going, is their daughter going to be safe or something like that? But would a non-white, had this been a non-white group, would anybody ever think that it would pose a threat? Because it's just like this narrative that they want to push, that especially if you look at this interview and then later on they show some violent people marching, people might associate the 2 things with each other. But then that's these 2 interviews, and then they actually interview this lady from the AFA. That I see that you just put the screenshot from the article here. So this was like inside the church, and so this reporter came, and the people from the AFA were nice. They invited them in, showed them around, and explained them how things are working. But what the Guardian piece mostly focuses on is, okay, this black lady here on the right asks whether she could possibly become a member in this church. And then her story is pretty much, oh, so you are excluding others. So not focusing on, no, it's a place for us where we can celebrate our well-being, white well-being, where we can celebrate our religion, our connection to our gods and goddesses. But she framed it as such as, oh, no, others are being excluded. And I also had this little impression, like right when they started with they did this little trick where all they purchased the church and then the town council meeting, because you might get the impression that the AFA had attempted to basically buy an existing church and repurpose it so that non-whites could no longer use it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. How did the lady, the one pictured here from the AFA, how did she handle that accusation of exclusion?
She pretty much didn't handle it very well. I don't want to be like too negative, but so the black lady later used the anti-white slur, white supremacist, and she just, so her reaction, if I remember correctly, was that she said, oh, we're not political, and why would somebody come to a church with politics? So she doesn't recognize this as an anti-white slur, but thinks it's something political, and believes that saying, oh, we are a church, we're not political, so therefore it doesn't affect us. But it didn't come across very believable. And then I believe this black lady here on the right then doubles down and then said, hey, how about non-whites who feel uncomfortable with your presence in this town? And again, I would have immediately, like politely asked this black lady, hey, is it possible that you are trying to arrive at an anti-white conclusion? Because if so, then it doesn't matter what you say, I reject it.
Very well said. That's magnificent. I've got to say that with the way that you are speaking here, Roy, and I've seen some other videos. I haven't had an opportunity to see the video that you were putting together yet, but Fernol says it's amazing, and so therefore it is. But I've also seen some others. But the way I'm listening to you, the way I'm hearing you speak right now about the world, this is the vision, this is the lens of white well-being. This is the significant difference. This is the way all of the news reportage and exploration of different subjects, this is the way it will be discussed, spiritually, religiously, politically, socially. This is the future of how our well-being will be discussed, because it is the way that works. And it just sounds so refreshing. Everything you're saying is insuperable to anti-white arguments. And that's exactly right. If you were to say to her, this lovely anti-white woman from The Guardian, if you were to say, are you trying to arrive at an anti-white conclusion? Because that'd be pretty despicable. If we celebrate, as Mr. George is pointing out, if society is in the midst of celebrating, and has been for over 100 years, celebrating every non-white person and non-white culture as special, and therefore, if something is special, you need something to not be special. What's not special in that equation? Well, it's only white people. Are you telling me that you're going to continue celebrating non-white people and cultures, and you are going to condemn the celebration of white well-being, the advocacy for white well-being? Is that what you're actually telling me? Because that's pretty disgusting. That's pretty immoral. If this lady for the AFA had spoken this way, or if Roy had been representing the AFA and had spoken to her this way, this interview would have been very different. The behavior of the reporter would have been very different. The story in which that conversation was taking place would have instantly been very different. That is why the tools, the concepts, the lexicon dialectics of the practice of going free, the anti-white narrative, work so successfully. The people at The Guardian would have walked away wondering, how in the heck did we end up sounding like villains, immoral monsters in this equation that would just not allow any white people to get together in however they see fit? And, you know, in this case, with these pagan symbols and rituals that they are reviving, creating, etc. How dare we end up walking into this environment and say everybody else can have their thing, but you can't have yours? And how is it that we're supposed to talk to these people? I saw this part of the discussion, Roy, where they talked to this woman and this lovely woman and her husband, white woman and black husband, and they had their lovely little baby with them. And they were talking about how, in so many words, revolting it is that white people would be allowed. They're biologically white erasing Western kind, and a people which is more meaningful than a salamander ceasing to exist on planet Earth. But nonetheless, we want to maintain all the types of salamanders as well. But absolutely despicable. They would have been put in the proper light. If you want to go do your thing with your anti-whiteism, then that's what it's going to be. But how dare you, and do not dare, to try to deny me the right to protect and preserve and recapture the destiny of Western kind, to celebrate who and what we are. The way Roy is articulating this is so refreshing. You're not seeing it. Please, folks, I know those who are already starting to jibe with this and get it, the lens of going free. They can feel it, but really do appreciate the difference here, the quantum difference, the night and day difference between talking about the subject matter within the anti-white narrative, attempting. You saw how this guy, this town council member who agreed to speak with them, how he reacted, his nervous laughter. It was so pathetic. It was so upsetting to observe. He left that conversation feeling like the villain, even though consciously he thinks, no, it should still be okay for people to have their First Amendment. It should still be okay that if all of these other groups are allowed to have their whole, this channel, this whole many channels, there are many Hispanic channels, there are many just black channels, there are for all these different groups, many just Arab channels, magazines, etc., publishing companies, all accepted to be standards in Western civilization of the regime, of the norm, of the mainstream. I know consciously that if they're allowed to have that, then white people should be allowed to have that, to photograph sports and to talk about sports or fishing or off-roading or camping from our point of view, to talk about ecology, to talk about space exploration from our point of view, to talk about history, to talk about our health from our point of view. Consciously, he knew that it should be, it's tantamount. It should be permitted. Nonetheless, he walked away from that feeling like the villain. And I know that as a guarantee, because I saw him get nervous and give his panicked smile and panicked laughter when she very calmly was asking, wielding these words that folks attempt to claim are just words and they don't do anything. Well, if they're just words and they don't do anything, then how was it this little anti-white reporter was able just to use one meme pathogen, this anti-white concept, white supremacist, and that white man was slain right there on the spot? If it's just words, then how is it? There were no tanks that rolled on Western civilization. There were concepts. And that's because, and they won because they were smarter than us. That's how they won. They were more disciplined. They submitted themselves to the more intelligent members of their communities, and they won. We have a problem outside of the white positive sphere and the work that we're doing specifically for white well-being and going free of the anti-white narrative. You can definitely see in the white sympathetic sphere that there is a big problem with submitting to something that is now clearly demonstrably more intelligent than everything else, because success determines whether or not something is more intelligent or not, something that overturns anti-whiteism. Roy, I just had to jump in because it is so marvelous hearing you say these things like heresy to the anti-white narrative and these anti-white slurs and anti-white concepts, anti-white conclusions, and all of these different constructions that you are using are marvelous. Not taking the words that they want you to give, not taking the names that they want you to call yourself, and then also not giving them the names that they call themselves as well, giving them the names that they deserve, the names that they've earned from their behavior and their ideas. It's marvelous. There are others, especially, of course, the entire outreach team. There is some marvelous work going on, ladies and gentlemen, and we are recapturing this destiny because we are changing the concepts that are used in the conversation, and by doing so, the story in which the contest for the recapture of our destiny takes place. So I had to salute you, Roy. You're such a great champion in service to white well-being, like so many of us here, and yet still such a tiny percentage of the overall white sympathetic sphere, and have already done more than not only all of the white sympathetic sphere that is alive and active today, but has ever been alive and active. We have actually manipulated the colossus of anti-whiteism into being into our story. We did that. Never let anybody else say otherwise. And Roy is a shining example of that. So yeah, I want you to pick it up. I didn't mean to interrupt, brother, but please, the mic is yours.
Oh, thank you so very much for those very kind words, dear brother. Yeah, it was very, very good to hear. Yeah, so speaking of this man from the town council, so I didn't do the video or slides or anything yet, because the workflow that I adapted at the moment is that I do the audio recording first, because they're most difficult, take most time, and I need to do them when I'm like fit and awake, and I can do the cuts and edits later when I'm tired. So I did the audio segments from that like yesterday, and I had some ideas. So my plan for this segment of the video is that I will first show this question that the black lady is asking. Then I will give the viewer some time to think about it. And then I will come with this trick and say, I think something like, do you really think you could have answered that inside the anti-white narrative? Well, let me show you what would have happened next. And then I play the follow-up question. And then I say, hey, how would you deal with that? And then I talk a bit about it. And then I will play the entire thing and show his reaction and explain that. How do you like that idea?
Dude, yes, I really like that idea.
Yeah, because like when I started with the trailer, I had the feeling that it got a little bit into just like a slideshow of MPs and MCs, and I don't want the video to be that. I want to be like more interactive and more interesting to watch, because everybody can just grab a copy of the Going Free and read it. I don't need to turn it into a video and putting a bunch of slides up, but giving people like a helpful tool, just, and especially this interview, because when you first see the question and then think about how would you answer the question. And then I give people the second opportunity to think, okay, had you answered this question in this way, here is what she's saying next. Did you anticipate this coming? And how would you then deal? Because once she does the follow-up question, you've already lost the argument had you attempted to argue inside the anti-white narrative.
Yeah.
So I'm using that tactic in the video. That's as much as I have done audio or any preparation, but I have watched the entire thing several times, so we can obviously also talk about the other part. And so about this interview with the AFA, one thing I really wanted to say, again, I don't want to be too negative and too much of a criticism. And it's easy to say in hindsight now that I'm just sitting in front of a computer and not talking to people in real life and having it come to me. But I think when talking to anti-whites, it's important not to fall for those traps that they give you. Because if you just have like a casual conversation, talk about a bunch of positive things, and then you say something, okay, here are our rules that we have to abide by, the anti-white is going to cut that section out because that's the most negative that they could portray us in. So you need to be careful not to say, okay, something that looks a little bit like being the villain in the anti-white narrative, even though it might not be, just saying, oh, no, it's just for us. And I explained some of those concepts in quite detail in the video, so that, for instance, the word whites only is meant to instill white guilt in people, and the word last whites only church, it doesn't mean what we might think it is.
Yeah.
Because we might think, oh, so it's really the last organization that has not been infiltrated and taken over by anti-whites. Isn't that something worthy of protection? The anti-whites obviously think something completely different about that.
Is when you were speaking about this notion of exclusivity and this question that people had to dance around about, why is it only for you? Do either of you think there's a way to handle that where, I mean, obviously the first thing and the most cutting thing is just with any kind of rhetoric that you're thrown, of exactly what Roy said of, wait, I want to give you the benefit of the doubt here, but are you trying to reach an anti-white conclusion? Put them in your narrative. We know that. But as a secondary type of thing, is there any opportunity, or is there any occasion to paint it in a way, because of exactly what you were just saying, Roy, that if you say, well, if they get the AFA to admit, and I'm not part of the AFA, I'm not speaking for the AFA, but I'm just trying to suss through all this, that there's a policy where X people aren't allowed. The way most people understand that, and how we all grew up, everyone watching is going to scoff at that. They're going to recoil at that. But more pitching the idea, not necessarily of exclusivity, but just not direct exclusivity, but more indirect or incidental exclusivity. Whereas if you had a whole night of celebrating people who are specifically from Kenya, or tribe that is in the area that's now the state of Kenya in Africa, and it's their folklore and cooking and stories and blah, 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 blah. And Jason and I asked, well, can we show up and be like your keynote speakers? It's like, that's really not an idea of exclusivity so much as just, we don't really have skin in that game. We don't have a leg to stand on there. It's not ours. So when you're talking about, we're people in Minnesota whose families came over from Great Britain and Germany and Scandinavia and Netherlands and Denmark and wherever else. I know Denmark's part of Scandinavia, but I was just rattling off a few. And we're talking about our folklore and the Eddas and Sigurd and the gods and this and that. It's more like, well, yeah, I mean, you could show up and observe if you want to, but like, do you even really want to? do you think there's occasion? Do you think there's a time and a place for that kind of angle? And if so, what do you think the best way to word that is?
Well, I think like in answer to, we actually have a perfect way of addressing that. Well, I'm not a Gothic, so not a priest or anything, and not like the right person to give religious advice, but we pretty much consider our gods to be our most distant ancestors. And we believe that in the afterlife, we will connect with our ancestors. So what we could say is something like this lovely non-white lady, if she dies, would she really feel happy being with a bunch of white guys in the afterlife, or wouldn't she prefer being with her own people and whatever native gods and ancestors she might have? Because I'm pretty sure she would feel much more happy being around her own people than being with us.
Right. If it was,
And
if you're considering that worldview, you say to her, we have this kind of worldview. So in our worldview, you're connected to your ancestors, and the gods are actually you're connected to as well. So would you feel comfortable with that? That all we're going to be talking about, like, you can come here, but all we're going to be talking about are these myths and these stories, these legends that really,
And
do you feel a visceral connection to that? Does that have meaning for you?
yeah, and also, I mean, I'm pretty sure there are plenty of organizations, churches, and whatever that focus on the well-being of non-white peoples. And every non-white group can easily just create a church somewhere, and it will be praised and lauded and applauded by the media. Just when we do it, they say, oh no, we need to be victimized.
Jason, did you have any thoughts on that kind of incidental exclusivity, and thus not even using the word exclusive because we know that's going to trigger people?
Yeah, I do actually. And I think you're absolutely right that this is about interests. And is this something that is in for example, a non-white person's interest to participate in? These are interests of the descendants of the people who created these myths, of the people who believe, whether they believe these gods were gods, or they believe that they were ancestors, or they believe that they were both, or they believe that they were stories that were just tales to their descendants. It's in that people's interest to want to live it and enjoy it, but the only reason, it would seem, other than for an occasional curiosity from somebody outside of Western kind, beyond just an occasional curiosity of what is it that they talk about, beyond that, any interest that they could have in that sort of thing would seem to me to be, or it would have to be, or at least in most instances would have to be, the interest of disrupting what those people were doing, because it is the exact same thing you're talking about here, Jared. There's no threat of, and there's a context here that isn't being discussed. And by the way, please, folks, get your financial gifts, questions, comments in, as we have 8.5 minutes left. And that is that if it were, say, Black people who wanted to get together in an exclusive way, which happens all the time, legally and morally in Western civilization, and talk about some sort of heritage and lineage, whether some of it's real, some of it's false, some of it's fiction, some of it's nonfiction, whatever it might be. If they wanted to get together and do that, then for them, there's no threat of losing that. So if Jared and I or two other white guys decided that they wanted to force their way in and just be there every Sunday or whatever day they get together, Wednesday, whatever day they get together, just to be there and sort of disrupt the harmony of a bunch of descendants of people who created these stories getting together and talking about these things, if we wanted to do that, none of those people in that group would feel the danger of losing their ability to get together and exclusively talk about Black heritage and history, fiction and nonfiction, and etc. Because it is everywhere. They're allowed to do it everywhere. They're encouraged to do it everywhere. It is considered a moral thing to do. Whereas with white people, we are not allowed to do it. We are not allowed to celebrate our heritage and history. We are not allowed to see ourselves in a good light. We are the anti-whites who exercise the control over Western civilization permit only the demonization of Western kind, permit only white guilt in Western kind. And so when we want to have a get-together, when some white people want to have a get-together, they want to celebrate and try to preserve and carry on traditions that our ancestors created, anti-whites of any color or any race, rather, of any race, of any so-called self-proclaimed victim group or what have you, wanting to barge their way into that, immediately is revealing themselves to be desirous of disrupting what those people are doing, which is, of course, what is already under threat everywhere else. So I can sympathize with Asatru people when they are asked the question, what if a non-white person, what if a Chinese guy wanted to just come in and sit there every day? Well, I guess technically, if he were just to come in and quietly observe, he's not going to be able to contribute because it's not his ancestors. He might be able to come in and say, just like Jared and I couldn't contribute to a gathering of Chinese people talking about their ancestors. All we could say is, well, it sounds very fascinating and well done. If the Chinese guy came in and said, this is all very fascinating, well done, then I'm sure nobody at the AFA would care that he came. But of course, they are immediately put on guard because in our society, Western civilization, we are under the thraldom of the anti-white narrative. And that is just those people are anti-whites showing up are there. Oh my gosh, what would be the percentage? I mean, it would almost beyond an incalculable percentage. It would be so small and infinitesimal that someone would want to show up just to do what I said that Jared and I might do at a meeting full of Chinese people, where we might say, this is fascinating, well done, and then move on. The odds would be almost certainly that they would be there to disrupt. And you could imagine there are legal ramifications. And this is the kind of thing that if I were going to suggest to Asatru that they think about incorporating in answers to these questions, as well as to what we've already said, and that is that since the likelihood of disruption, since the likelihood of destruction is so high, because so many people are so vehemently, viscerally anti-white, there is a legal matter /social of the liability of having somebody come in who is, say, non-white and anti-white, maybe two people, so they can have validating fake stories and show up and then leave there, rend their garments, claim that they were forcibly forced out of the church or whatever it is, whatever the AFA calls it, and that they were cussed. And the media, the anti-white media, the regime's media, would of course believe every single word of what they had to say about what happened to them. So there are genuine legal issues. And if the AFA wanted a position that would be foolproof, it would be, we are concerned about disruptors coming in, and we're not going to be able to videotape every single gathering. We're not going to be able to make sure that everybody is behaving. We have no way of stopping anti-whites from coming in and then leaving just to observe, leaving and saying falsehoods about what took place here at our church. And so, maybe AFA could have, and this would be something else I would suggest for the AFA, is maybe you have a day every 6 months or so where you invite the totality of the community to come in. You can set up all the video cameras you want then, and to explain what Asatru is and what you all are doing, And then you can say, that's our day when everybody's allowed to find out who we are and what we do. And we do it once every 6 months. Otherwise, there's serious liability and legal ramifications by just having folks show up who do not have the heritage that we have.
Yeah, just quickly on this topic, because later on in this video, they actually show like some other group with this so-called anti-white heathen, and they actually show like a ritual. My impression when watching that, and I don't want to speak negatively about other religions or anything, like my impression was it felt more like something where like created for television. So there's some person on a stage who's performing some kind of act and a bunch of people watch, like made for an audience. Where when we do ritual, it's more like we concentrate our thoughts and our feelings on ourselves, our ancestors, and our gods. It's not like a big televised thing with like an entertainer or something. But I think that's also one of these things in our modern world. Everybody believes like, oh, everything needs to be entertainment. There needs to be like somebody there on the stage doing a performance. You cannot just like be quiet and just meditate and think for yourself and just have your peace.
Yeah, very well said. It's like they're thinking of what is this going to look like on social media, and that's not what that kind of practice, a religious, spiritual practice and community like that is there for. I just have one last question, and then Jason can let us know if there are any chats. Again, please do get any questions in if you have anything on your mind, because we're only going to be with you a few more minutes. But we were speaking about deceptive editing and other media practices before. All of these things they do to very subtly, subconsciously condition the viewer to arrive at preset conclusions. Was there anything, either explicit or implicit, Roy, that would leave the audience thinking, leave the viewer thinking that the AFA is not showing what they really do behind closed doors, and they are likely, very likely, much more hateful and nefarious than this nice little PR smiley face they're putting on for us right now? Did you get that impression at all?
Well, this guy that they interviewed, this anti-white heathen, he actually said explicitly that I don't remember the exact words, but he said something very negative that, oh, they're doing evil deeds behind those doors and we are going to expose them. It's like completely ridiculous. That's like the most negative thing that I really saw explicitly stated from that video. But the entire tone was just like trying to link our religion, our ancient symbols with net groups, with ideologies from the past, with political groups, with people doing weird, stupid shit, and even people just doing things that are morally wrong and morally reprehensible.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that. And Jason, do we have any questions for Roy before we go?
Let's see. I take a look at refreshing over here on Cash App, and I will slip around this way and see. What a fantastic topic, and what a great topic for Roy to address head on. I know that I was mentioning earlier that the AFA had a winter celebration that recently. So this is these are people going out, normal folks, and doing good things, and they're not being problematic for their communities. So for the Guardian, this anti-white rag, to send this anti-white reporter out there to do this hit piece, to do this slander, is really despicable and completely typical of the anti-whites and their behavior. So I'm really, really delighted to see that Roy's taking this on and taking it on in a way that he's using the lens of going free, which can be used by people in every single lodge, business, church, whether it's Christian, Catholic, or pagan. atheists. This can be used everywhere and should be used because it is so successful for white well-being. And Roy is demonstrating, and I cannot wait to see this video once it's finished. And I will gladly, depending upon how long it ends up being, I will delightfully play the video on going free as soon as he's finished. And we need to be sharing. Our community needs to be the community of white well-being. We need to be doing things like creating GFCs, which, by the way, I got a big tomorrow. I'll be sharing with everybody a big surprise about a person starting a GFC. It was a big shock to me, so I'm very delighted to hear it. And I'll be sharing that tomorrow. But we need to be looking into the success of this lexicon and these dialectics vis-a-vis everything else. We as a community. Now, there are going to be people out in the rest of the white sympathetic sphere. There are going to be people who are even white positive that continue to stumble through the anti-white narrative. And we just need to look at that and say, well, maybe they're just, their purpose in the world is to, as far as we're concerned, is to serve as a gateway in order to make it to the place where the people have the right vision, they have the right tools, they are self-starters. We are really a collection. We have more geniuses, certified geniuses, than any other white sympathetic endeavor ever. We have more self-starters, more entrepreneurs than any other white sympathetic endeavor ever. We have people who have made the decision that they are going to be the ones who change the world. And so we need to finally just say, look, dust our hands off in this community, as Roy has done here, and say, we are just going to be within our story. We are not going to use the locutions of the anti-whites that are designed to destroy us. We're going to speak this way from now on. And if people don't want to be a part of that, then best of luck to them in the rest of the white sympathetic sphere, white negative or white positive. Best of luck to them. But we really need to move toward each other, because there are enough of us now that people will look in. They'll see the grand successes. They'll see the great party. They'll want to be a part of that, rather than always the losing team, rather than always hating themselves when they walk away from these conversations, these contests. There's always that part of themselves that they hate, especially if they're white negative people. There's always that part of them that they hate themselves. And so let's do this. Let's continue to make this happen. And if anybody has any comments or questions, get them in now, because this is it. This is the final closing minutes.
Just real quick, brother, I just forgot to mention that, actually.
Please.
So not just in that area in Minnesota, pretty much every of our 3 hofs, we do like a monthly food giveaway where the AFA gives food out to homeless people and to people of need. And this is for everybody, regardless of race. Like if somebody is homeless, if somebody is poor, cannot afford food, they just can come, and we help them.
Yeah. Matt, when he was on Flavel, Julie corrected, well, I think I said that or another one, but she told me that's the right way to say his name in the chat. He spoke at length about all of the things that AFA does. So if you're interested, you can go to the afterparty.tv and type in his name, Matt, Flavel or AFA, and pull up the episode archived from May and hear all about the full gamut of their activities.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. Do check that out, folks. So let's see. We have over here on Entropy, right out first, our dear sister Heidi, $5 financial gift. And she says, "Hail Roy." Hail Roy indeed. A great champion. Been with us for a long time and doing wonderful things, and continues to march forward as a true gladiator hero in service to white well-being. We have next here, get your raucous emojis ready, folks, because Wayne Scully has financially gifted $25. Thank you so much, Wayne. Really do appreciate that kind financial gift. And he writes, "Great show, gents. It went too quickly, though. I like when the shows heavily incorporate the going free lexicon." He writes on, but I just have to say, me too, Wayne. Me too. I absolutely love it. And that's the way it's got to be. We have to be more this way, because if we say it authoritatively, we use it authoritatively, then those who show up, they will adopt. If we are tepid, if we're kind of like, are you interested in this kind of an attitude, it works though. Look at all the success. People are not going to adopt it. And don't worry about the ridiculous accusations of people outside and white negative folks. Don't worry about their ridiculous accusations. They have far more words. They have far more ideological words, economic words, words that the villain have taken for themselves, words that the villain has given the antagonist in their story that these white negative people take for themselves. They have far more concepts and words that you absolutely have to use, or you don't pass their litmus tests, and you don't pass their purity spiraling. So ignore these folks and pick up the tools, the loving tools of what works for our people. Wayne goes on here. Just an FYI, Jason, you just have to move to China to become Chinese. Oh, yes. Didn't you know that? Then you can get in touch with your Chinese ancestors. Oh, so true, Wayne. He says, LOL, have a great rest of the weekend, everyone. Yes, I know. It would just ask the next, and make it a white anti-white that you meet. Just tell them the same thing. Say, if I move to China, can I begin to get in touch with my Chinese ancestors about all that we have done and contributed to the world as Chinese people? Zero Talent, wonderful to see you. Get your raucous emojis, folks, together for Zero Talent, financially gifting $25. God bless you, brother. Just watch the hit piece. I would love to see the unedited interviews, to see all of the leading questions. They tried so hard to get some sound bites, but an honest listener would not hear any hate of non-whites. On the other hand, they did have plenty of people hating the AFA, and all of it steeped in anti-whiteism. Very well stated, yes. And hating the AFA, not because of the AFA, but because they're white people who have come together to whatever degree, it doesn't take much, not be anti-white. The AFA could actually have big anti-white elements to it, and in some fictional world, but as long as they still had something that wasn't anti-white, then the anti-whites would come to condemn them and shut them down. So thank you so much for that, good brother. Great to see you. And let's see, what else do we have here? I think that might be it on Entropy. Over here on Cash App, we have Art Acrobats. Thank you so much, brother. Financially gifting $2.14. And writing here, honor of white male winning $10 million discrimination lawsuit. Yeah, thank you so very much for bringing that up. And in honor of that, so we don't always lose, but we almost always lose in the anti-white courts. This will happen occasionally, folks, and has happened occasionally. But remember that the law is never your shield. It will never work for you. Any thoughts that you all have on any of the financial gifts that I just read? Roy?
Oops, sorry, I had myself muted. No, this was very, very nicely said and good feedback. Yeah, so most importantly, yeah, I would also really like to see the unedited interviews that they did, because they clearly picked the worst parts ever. And especially this interview with this guy from the town council, where he is clearly answering a question that we are not being shown.
Yeah, everything is disingenuous from the anti-white, and they show up with these presumptions that are part of their story, their anti-white narrative. And if you if you allow them to dictate the story that you're in, ladies and gentlemen, you never, ever, ever can win. You can, and win means recapture our destiny. So a big thank you to the great Roy Danton. Let's get a big round of applause for this champion and all that he's done in service to white well-being. We're talking about gods. He's truly one of them. And we are very proud of Roy and all the good that he has done and continues to do and will do in service to white well-being. I believe, okay, we have in the question widget, we had Irish Ice talking about some issues he had unrelated to the stream tonight. Irish Ice brother, if you will bring those up tomorrow on Going Free, the Going Free gathering, then potentially I'll have an opportunity to speak to those. But thank you for your service to white well-being as well. Well, Roy, it's been a magnificent tap, but everything that has a beginning has an end, and it's time to tap out. So, brother, will you please tell folks again where they can find you and the good work you are doing, and roughly a guess when you think you'll be done with this rebuttal video?
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube as Roy Danton, and I'm also on Twitter and on Gab as the Roy Danton, and on Telegram, I'm not actually sure I'm either the Roy Danton or the real Roy Danton. I would have to look that up. I don't really talk to myself that often. Yeah, I would like to thank you so much for having me. And also all that you have done and Going Free has also helped me so much, because just even half a year ago, I was so scared of like just talking in public. And now I'm getting really eased into it, and I'm doing quite fine. And I also didn't like hearing my voice at all, but now with this nice microphone, I'm very excited about this video project. I'm not sure how long it will take. I would hope to have it done by maybe like Thanksgiving at the very latest, because I have some stuff to do after that, maybe end of next week. But I don't want to rush it too much. I want to take my time. Then I also don't want to make it too long. But do you have like a recommendation of what should be like a reasonable length? Would you think like 45 minutes or something?
I would perhaps break it into parts and maybe have modules, Roy, where it's about 10 minutes each. And I think you'll get more people clicking on it if it was that length.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, I think about that. Maybe something with like the trailer, then the interviews and something like that. Because
Yeah.
I'm getting afraid that it's getting way too long.
But it sounds like a great angle for you of how, like you said, you were thinking of how you might want to approach videos and how you might want to share your perspective and how you're able to analyze things. And I know I can speak for all of us here when I say we're really looking forward to it, and we're really happy that you're doing this.
Yeah, I'm actually getting like quite excited about this, and it's a lot of work doing videos, and those who are not producing content might not even realize how much work it is doing those. You only really appreciate it when you do it yourself and see how much those tiny little details take. And I'm still just learning how to do it, but I'm quite excited, and I'm looking forward to like maybe doing something like that on a regular basis, where I can show how to use the lexicon and help people. And I think it's also something that we should like tell people, that if you see something that you don't like, don't just complain about it, just do something about it. Like I did. I saw this very ugly hit piece. I didn't like it, and I didn't say, hey, somebody please do something, but I said, no, I'm going to do something.
Exactly. That's what we're doing here. So I mentioned before, all of these are archived along with the Going Free shows on the afterparty.tv. Especially if you're new here, welcome. This is a different kind of approach that we take here. It's might be different than what you've heard. We know we have people showing up and sometimes being wallflowers, maybe not participating in the chat, but just checking things out. But we're glad that you're here. And if you're interested, more than 3.5 years of shows are cataloged on the afterparty.tv. You can search it by guest name. You can search it by different topics. All the shows are tagged with the main themes from each episode. So it's a pretty good record of what has been going on here and the community that has blossomed around these online meetups. Very real community. My site is thegreatorder.com. I have found myself to be primarily a musician. That is really what gets me up in the morning and keeps me up late at night sometimes. Emphasis on staying up at night for some reason. That's when the creativity happens. But I'm Jared, and my site's thegreatorder.com, and that is the focus, the music. We all have different focuses, and I'm very interested in arts and culture, and particularly writing, recording, and eventually performing. I don't know how that's going to happen, but at first virtually, looking into that, performing music. Anyway, Roy, it was great speaking to you, and I'm very glad that you're doing this. You broke it down, as we knew you would, very lucidly and logically, and I think it's a great help to everyone that's listening now and in replay. So I wish everyone a wonderful rest of their weekend, and we will all talk soon. Jason will take us out.
Yes, sir. Very well said. Mr. George, we can't say enough about all the great work that Mr. George does. He has a brand new song out with For Null, Eye to Eye. Probably be playing it again on Sunday. But a big debt of gratitude to the one and only Mr. George and all the work and service he has given to White Wellbeing. We wouldn't be where we are if it weren't for Mr. George and his efforts as well. So thank you so much, good brother. And a big thank you to everybody, as Jared was saying, who watch live and in replay. And those who are new, please remember to check back often and see if you are still subscribed on whatever platform it is, because the anti-whites are always up to their funny business. And with us, maybe as much or more than most of the others who are in service to White Wellbeing, because we are the ones who are doing it with love in our hearts and focus on ourselves instead of on others. I want to thank For Null and Ray for their great moderation today, moderating duties, I should say. And look, I see I just turned to the screen here, and I see so many wonderful folks over there right now. Rory and 0022 saying thank you and waving goodbye. And we will be back, though. I'm very proud of Roy. He did a magnificent job here today on tap. And make sure you don't miss any of these episodes, folks, because we're going places. It's called The Recapture of Our Destiny. And we look forward to seeing you